Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Neoliberal Podcast, part of the Center for New Liberalism. I'm your host, Jeremiah Johnson, and this episode is going out on the 25th of June. That's a very special date for me. It's the date when, 4 years ago, I donated a kidney to a stranger. It's one of the most meaningful things I've ever done, and this anniversary means a lot to me. And so today, I'm sharing an episode I recorded a few years back about why you should also consider donating a kidney. Now, not everyone can donate, but I believe more people can than currently do, and more people should. And I make that case here today in this episode. Thanks for listening, and let's jump right into it. So, what I'm talking about today is kidney donation, and specifically, I'm going to make the case that some of you out there, some of the people listening to this podcast, should donate a kidney. That aside from kidney donation being good in the abstract and it's a lovely thing to do, I'd like to talk about why I did it. I'd like to talk about how it went for me when I did donate my kidney. And I'd like to make a positive argument that you should also consider doing this. You right now, listening to this podcast, should donate a kidney. That obviously won't apply to every single person, but I think for some of you it will. For some of you, I think you should. And, normally I would say that I generally talk about kidney donation in a more abstract sense, that kidney donation is good, more people should consider it, and I kind of keep that layer of removal where I'm not definitively saying you should donate a kidney. I'm saying people should donate kidneys more often. In this episode, I'm going to kind of drop that and talk to you directly about why you should do it. And that argument won't apply to every single person who's listening, but as I said, I think it will apply pretty directly to some of you. So let's jump in. So, the basic argument I like to make about why you personally should donate a kidney kind of comes in three parts. The first part is kind of background. Let's talk about kidney disease, and let's talk about why kidney disease is a serious problem. So, kidneys can kind of be thought of as a silent epidemic in the United States. And really all over the world, but in the United States, kidney disease kills more people than homicides, all homicides put together. It, in fact, kills 3 times as many people as all homicides put together. It kills more people than car crashes. It kills more people than breast cancer. It kills more people than suicide. Like, kidney disease is a massive cause of death in the United States. And it simply does not get as much coverage as any of this stuff. Obviously things like homicides get more coverage in the news because they're newsworthy, they're like shocking. But, people talk about the suicide epidemic or deaths of despair all the time, and you don't hear kidney disease getting that same level of attention. You hear breast cancer getting all sorts of stuff, pink ribbons this, pink ribbons that. And certainly breast cancer deserves a lot of attention, but comparatively, kidney disease gets almost nothing. Car crashes are obviously, again, in that category of things that are shocking and newsworthy, but kidney disease is just one of these extremely underappreciated causes of death. There are more than 100,000 people currently on the kidney donation wait list. This constitutes the vast majority of all people who are awaiting life-saving organ transplants. It is a massive problem, and most of those people on the wait list will not get a kidney. Most of those people won't, and they will mostly end up dying from kidney disease at some point. And that actually understates the scale of the problem, because even with 100,000 people on the kidney donation wait list, that doesn't count the likely tens of thousands of people who could benefit from a donated kidney but have not put their names on the wait list because the line to get a kidney that you have to wait in is so incredibly discouragingly long that there are people who just don't bother to join the kidney wait list. Now, on top of just the amount of people who are going to die from kidney disease, which is tens of thousands of people a year, on top of just the deaths, if you have kidney disease, it's often really, really awful for your life. You can live with it for a little while, but it makes your life pretty awful. The technical name here is end-stage renal disease, or ESRD. And people with end-stage renal disease are normally on dialysis. Now, dialysis has improved a lot in recent years. It's more common now to see dialysis that can be done from home, but dialysis is still a pretty miserable procedure. Dialysis saps your energy. It makes you feel like crap. It kind of steals your ability to lead a normal life in a lot of ways. It is a really draining, energy-sucking procedure. It takes several hours in the classic dialysis sense. A lot of people who can't do it at home have to drive to the dialysis center, be there for 3 or 4 hours, and this is 3 or 4 times a week, and just they feel like crap afterwards. And it just, number one, it impacts your quality of life tremendously in that you're almost always tired. Dialysis sucks a lot out of you. It's literally taking the blood out of your body in order to clean it and putting the blood back in. And on top of just how it makes you feel, it also is hard to hold down a job when you have dialysis because, again, you've got to, 3 or 4 times a week for 3 or 4 hours at a time go into this dialysis center and be on dialysis at some point. And so on top of feeling like crap all the time because your kidneys are failing and because you've just had dialysis, and on top of, that, you have all these gaps in your schedule that you have to deal with. And dialysis in the end only replicates about 10% of a normal kidney's function. So it's not even really, it's keeping you alive, but it's not keeping you at a high level of function. You have a tiny percentage, a tenth of a kidney, if you're on dialysis. And all this is reflected in the survival rates for people on dialysis. Survival rates are grim. Something like 20 to 25% of patients on dialysis will die within a year. And these stats are slightly out. I looked these stats up a couple years ago when I was doing my research about kidney donation. But so these are all as of 2019. But only about 1/3 of dialysis patients survive 5 years on dialysis. 1/3. So it's grim. The prospects for survival with kidney failure, with end-stage renal disease, are really, really bad. And if you have it, even if you are surviving, it makes your life pretty miserable. So that's the background of what is the scale of the problem and how does this problem impact people. That's what we're talking about when we talk about kidney disease. Now, the second part, because I told you there were 3 parts to this, the second part of the argument that you should donate a kidney is that living donations produce extremely large benefits to recipients. Now, I would also encourage people to, offer your organs, should you die. I think it's great to be an organ donor, but living donations are even better than deceased donations. Or I've heard a couple names for this, cadaver donations sometimes. Living donations are even better. They produce greater benefits. So let's talk about living donations. The great tragedy of the wait list, of this, 100,000 person strong wait list, is that the majority of people with end-stage renal disease can be helped. There's some people who have kidney disease who are just way, way old. They're too old for surgery. They're too sick. They've got a bunch of other conditions. But that's not the majority. The majority of end-stage renal disease patients can easily extend their life if they get a donated kidney. The best estimates show that because of a lack of kidneys, it's extra tens of thousands of people dying every year. Recipients who get kidneys from living donors tend to get more than 10 additional years on average, and that number has been increasing over time pretty steadily. There's another stat that I like where if the donor survives the first year, which a lot of that is just saying if the donor is mostly healthy and if they don't reject the kidney right away, then on average they get like 20 years with the kidney, something like that. So it really is quite possible for kidneys to last a couple decades. And, it's a lot of time. It's a lot of time. Imagine giving someone a decade or 2 decades of life. Dylan Matthews has a quote. Dylan Matthews gave a kidney. He's one of the people who inspired me to donate. And he's written about it. He actually came on the Neoliberal Podcast a few years back before I did this, and we talked about it. And he had a quote that says, I went through about a week of pain and a mild recovery, and as a result, somebody got to go off of dialysis and enjoy another decade of life. And that's a really big benefit. The other thing to note is that these are not empty years. This is not like, if somebody lived to 90 and then we kind of artificially found a way to extend their lifespan to 100, but they're like in their 90s. It's not a great life to lead, maybe. I don't know. This is not that scenario. If you compare the horror and the terror of being on dialysis to what it feels like after you get a kidney, it's night and day. Dialysis is feeling awful all the time. You constantly feel like you're dying because you kind of constantly are dying. You are constantly on dialysis on the threshold of just enough kidney function to live. And all of a sudden you get this new kidney and it basically just cleans the crap out of your system. And most reports from people who get kidneys are that within a couple hours they feel incredible and amazing and like they haven't felt in years. Basically, they get relatively healthy years to live with a real kidney system. And, you could basically make the argument that a typical living kidney donation will change someone's life expectancy from less than 5 years, likely miserable all the time, to 10 to 20 years, of being a normal functioning human being. And that's a huge deal. I have managed to find this stat. This comes from the Organ Procurement and Transplantation Network and the Scientific Registry of Transplant Recipients. And they say, if you remove from consideration patients who died for reasons unrelated to graft failure, so unrelated to the kidney failure, they had a heart attack or they got hit by a bus or something. If you remove from consideration those patients who died for reasons unrelated to graft failure, the half-life of a living donor kidney graft that survives at least 1 year is 26.6 years. Basically, what this is saying is if your kidney you donate a kidney, it doesn't get rejected, right away, which is not that common, but, in rare cases will happen. And if, you take out the deaths that happen for some other reason, accidents or, cancer or some other disease, the average kidney donor lasts 26 years. And that's incredible. The other benefit that can happen is that when you're a living kidney donor, if you're donating to someone you don't know, if you're donating to a stranger, which is what I did, I did not know anyone who personally needed a kidney. This is not a relationship I had. I just donated a kidney to anyone who needed it because I thought it was a good thing to do. And when you do that, you can start what's called a kidney chain. Basically, the way kidney chains work is that kidney chains are solving a coordination problem. You have this issue with kidney donation where maybe, Bob is sick and Bob's brother wants to donate a kidney to him. But the thing is, they have to match. They have to have the same blood type and some kidney markers. It's like certain protein markers or something like that in the kidneys have to match. There's like 6 sets of markers, and you need to match on most of them. I don't know the biology all that well, if I'm being very honest, but I think it's something like that. Like, if you match on 6 out of 6, that's amazing. If it's 5 out of 6 or 4 out of 6, I think you could still do it in a lot of cases. If it's less than that, I think they usually don't recommend that you transplant if you don't match that well. But the point is that you have to match. So maybe Bob has a willing donor, but he doesn't, his willing donor doesn't match. And this happens all the time. This is an extremely common scenario. So what they started doing was they started trying to find swaps that they could do where Shelley needs a kidney and Shelley's daughter is willing to donate but is not a match. But they say, hey, Shelley's daughter, you donate to Bob because you match him, and Bob's brother, you donate to Shelley's mother, and basically they can swap as long as they match each other. And so that helps a lot. Being able to do those swaps helps a lot. And they've even done like 3 and 4 level loops where A's relative donates to B, B's relative donates to C, C's relative donates to D, and D's relative donates all the way back to A. So this is the way that it works. But you can see that there's a problem where the loop has to close, right? It always has to come back to the beginning so that somebody's not getting screwed over, basically. And that gets logistically really, really difficult if you get above, say, 3. It's uncommon to see anything above 3. Swaps are very common. 3-way swaps are somewhat, you see them every now and then. Anything above that is very uncommon because you have to close the loop. And so you have to have a perfect lineup of a bunch of people who all match each other's relatives. And the longer that goes, the harder that coincidence is to find. But what happens when a person donates to a stranger is that you can have an open-ended one. You don't have to close the loop. I donate to A, and then A's relative donates to B, B's relative donates to C, and that can just go on forever, and it doesn't need to come back to A because I have donated to A, and it just doesn't have to loop back around. And it makes it really much easier to make these long chains happen. So when you donate to a stranger, you can start this kidney chain, and basically you are responsible. You have caused not just one person to get a kidney, but many people to get kidneys. The average length of a chain is 3 or 4, but it can be as high as 10, 12, or longer. There are documented cases that have gone on for, double-digit chains. I actually don't know what the record is, but I know that there are chains that stretch into the double digits, and they're all kickstarted because someone was willing to give a kidney to a stranger. So that is the second point that I make, if my argument rests on 3 points. We talked about how kidney problem is a big problem in society, that it doesn't get enough attention, and it's really bad. We talked about how living kidney donations produce a lot of benefit. They produce a long extension of lifespan, and that is high quality lifespan. You go from a short, miserable life expectancy to a long, healthy life expectancy. And not just that, if you're donating to a stranger, you can kick off a chain where you're responsible for that happening not once, but many times, because that chain would not have happened without you. The third point that I rest my argument on for why you should donate a kidney is that living donations are very safe for the donor. And that's probably the question that a lot of people have. A lot of people are probably very willing to accept, yes, the statistics don't lie. Kidney donation or kidney disease is a problem. And, it does seem pretty clear that it's a good thing. More people should do this, and getting a kidney is a great thing. And certainly if I was sick, I would want a kidney. But they'll stop and say, is this safe, though? I have a lot of concerns if somebody's going to be cutting an organ out of my body. That seems like a big deal. I'm not sure about that. And that's a very reasonable thing to say when someone's asking you to cut an organ out of your body. Certainly you should do a lot of research about whether or not that's safe. That's very reasonable. I fully understand that. But in the course of doing this, I did a lot of research. I read the papers myself. I went into medical journals and read literature reviews and really tried to do my homework as much as possible. And while any major surgery is going to involve risk, it's going to involve some costs, any major surgery should not be taken lightly. I think the true conclusion that you can't run away from is that the risks from donating a kidney are really very small, and that the vast majority of donors have no long-term impact on their lives whatsoever. So let's talk about it. So in terms of monetary cost, kidney donation has zero direct cost. A lot of Americans listen to this podcast, and I'm sure they're thinking about, will my health insurance cover this? Oh my gosh, what's going on with that? Direct costs are zero. Kidney donation is 100% covered by Medicare. And there's an additional layer of, like, in rare cases, you go through some other channel, but it's 98% accurate to say that just literally everything is covered by Medicare. All of it. I never presented my insurance information when I donated kidney. I had to go through, several months of testing, and they test my kidneys, they give you a psychological evaluation, they talk to you about why you're doing this, and, blah, blah, blah. And there's all these rounds of things. And through this whole process, up to, getting on the operating table, I literally never even gave them my insurance. They had no idea if I had insurance or not, because Medicare was paying for 100% of it. The reason that's the case is because there's actually an old loophole in some of the original Medicare legislation. I think Richard Nixon may have signed this in, where in addition to being for older folks, Medicare was also written to cover all kidney disease. I think back at that time, kidney disease was not really as big of an issue societally, I guess. But so every person who is on dialysis, who has end-stage renal failure, is on Medicare, and Medicare pays for their dialysis. And so additionally, Medicare also pays for kidney transplants, both for the donor's costs and the recipient costs. And it actually saves Medicare money. If you're a budget hawk and concerned about the federal deficit, that's not the best reason to do this. But I will say, it saves the federal government money when you donate a kidney, because dialysis is actually super, super expensive. And even with a transplant costing, in the low six figures for the total cost, donor plus recipient to actually make that surgery happen, even with a transplant being a six-figure surgery, it still saves money over paying for a couple years of dialysis. It's cheaper than that, because dialysis is really expensive. So the federal government saves money by getting people off dialysis. It's a weird but true fact. And so Medicare is happy to pay 100% of costs for kidney donation. So you don't have to worry about that. There are some potential indirect costs. You could think of this in terms of opportunity cost, like you might have to take time off of work, and maybe you won't get paid during that time. You could also think about, there might be travel cost for you to go to the hospital. Usually you just arrange it so that it's at your local hospital, but still there may be some travel cost. You might have some child care expenses while you're recovering, things like that. So there are some indirect costs. The good news is that actually during the last years of the Trump administration, they introduced a program where the federal government would cover some of those things, cover incidental expenses like lost wages, travel costs, childcare cost for kidney donors, for organ donors. So that really, it means filling out some paperwork, but the actual costs should not be an issue anymore. Now, what about risk and not cost? We've been talking about cost as a monetary thing, but also you can think about cost as like, is this going to cost me my health? Even there, I think the medical risk is quite small. There are risks, and I don't want to say there's zero risk, but the statistics that I read and everything that I've seen says that the risks are quite small. You can separate those into, let's say, immediate risks and long-term risks, or short-term and long-term. So the short-term risks come from just you're having a major surgery. And again, you should never take major surgery lightly. Somebody's opening your abdomen, sticking tools inside, slicing some stuff up, and pulling out an organ. That's a big deal. But when you think about this compared to other things, it's relatively safe. If you're a donor who's, does not have high blood pressure, let's say, that's one of the risk factors is high blood pressure. But if you're a donor who does not have high blood pressure, there is a roughly 1 in 10,000 chance of death during operation. It is lower than the rate of death during childbirth. If that's a frame of reference, if someone tells you that they're pregnant and, you're happy for them and they're having a baby and they're very excited about it, you should be less worried about somebody who gives a kidney dying on the table than you are about that person dying during birth, and that's what most of us don't think. Most of us might be a little nervous for somebody who's giving birth, but more in kind of a, oh my gosh, you're about to be a new parent way of nervous. We don't think during most births, at least in the United States and other rich countries, I'm nervous this person will die giving birth. So if you're not that nervous about somebody dying giving birth, then you probably shouldn't be that nervous about donating a kidney either. The risk is higher if you have high blood pressure. It's maybe one order of magnitude higher, from 1 in 10,000. But, most people who are healthy and young and, don't have complicating conditions, it's a very, very safe surgery. Like, it's to the point where if anybody who would die during this, it would be like a national scandal. Like, they would shut down a department and, like, have investigations. It would be a whole thing, because it just doesn't happen anymore. Just being realistic. That's the primary immediate risk, is the risk of dying during the surgery. But it's a very, very rare event. There's also some risk for like secondary issues post-surgery. Maybe you come out of surgery and you have a fever for a couple days, or an infection for, your wound gets infected. But those are, almost always minor. They're almost always the kind of things that clear up after a few days or a week, and they don't happen to very many people. It's on the order of 10%, perhaps. So when you think about immediate levels of risk, the risks are just not that high. Now, when you think about long-term risks, you might say, okay, you've convinced me that I'm not going to bleed out on the table. I'm not going to die during the surgery. The advancement of this science, frankly, has gotten really, really good. The science of kidney donation has advanced an incredible amount. Just in the last 10 years, the way that they do these operations has been revolutionized. It is so much safer than it used to be, and it was already pretty safe 10 years ago, and now it's like it's on another level. But you might be saying, okay, but I have to live without a kidney. Isn't there going to be some long-run risk? And the answer is yes, But again, it's really not as much as you'd think. So the typical kidney donor has about a 0.3% chance of developing kidney disease in their lifetime. This is lower than the general population because the average person who's accepted to be a kidney donor is healthier than normal. So if you qualify as a kidney donor, if they accept you, you probably have about a 0.3% chance, about 1/3%, that at some point in your life you would develop kidney disease, end-stage renal disease. If you donate a kidney, that risk goes up, but it goes from about 0.3 to about 0.9, or about 1% chance. So the risk triples, but you're still kind of moving from a low number to another low number. The vast majority, 99% of kidney donors, still do not ever develop end-stage renal disease. So again, you want to be honest about this risk here. I want to be honest, but it is a very low risk. It triples a very low number, and something like 99% of kidney donors will not develop end-stage kidney disease. One other risk to be aware of is that for women who are still of birthing age, I guess, of pregnancy age, and who want to donate, there is an additional risk of preeclampsia if they were to get pregnant. If you are a young woman and you donate a kidney and you want to become pregnant in the future, it's something to consider, because donation increases the risk of preeclampsia from, I believe it's from 5% to 11%. So again, it's not a guarantee that you're going to get preeclampsia, but it makes pregnancy slightly riskier for those women who have donated. So in conclusion, some risks do exist, but they are relatively rare and they're relatively minor, especially in comparison to the enormous benefit that kidney donation provides. The immediate risk of dying is extremely, extremely low. Basically, what you end up dealing with in most cases is you just wake up from surgery and you have a couple days where you're really sore and you feel like crap. And then you need a couple weeks to kind of get all the way back to normal. And after that, you're basically just normal. I have not changed anything in my life, basically, since donating a kidney. It took me a couple weeks to get back to normal, to feel like myself again, as my one kidney increased function to make up for one kidney being missing. It's an interesting fact about donating a kidney is that when you donate a kidney, your remaining kidney will actually become more efficient, and I don't know if it physically grows bigger. It basically goes from doing 50% of a normal job, because you have two kidneys. It goes from doing 50% of a normal job to increases its output to 75 or 80% of a normal, And so by itself, it's almost making up for the kidney being gone. And nothing about my life has changed. In the 2 years since, I'm the same guy, and I do the same stuff. I don't have to change my diet at all. I've not changed my diet. I've not changed, my drinking. I'm a guy who enjoys beverages sometimes, like most of us do. And, I'm still drink socially in basically the same level I did before. I've never been a heavy drinker, but I drink socially like many people. And I haven't had to change that behavior. The couple things that I've been told are, I got told by someone, if you do cocaine, you have to stop doing coke. And luckily, I have never done cocaine, and I don't really have any interest in doing cocaine, so that one didn't apply to me. But apparently, cocaine is harmful to your kidneys or something. I'm not a doctor. Go ask a doctor if you really want to know. I've heard the term nephrotoxic thrown around, where nephro is kind of the root of kidney. So that's one thing that somebody told me, but I've not had to change. The other thing is that I have changed the pain relievers I take from NSAIDs, which are like aspirin and ibuprofen, I've stopped using those and I now use acetaminophen because apparently it's just it's a little better for your kidneys. The other ones can be tough on your kidneys if you take too many of them. But again, and even that is like, it doesn't really matter if I take an aspirin as long as it's not a bunch of them. But all of that just to share, I'm kind of sharing these incredibly minor details because legitimately, and I really mean this, the only thing that has really changed about my day-to-day life at all is that I switched from taking aspirin to taking acetaminophen on the rare occasions that I get headaches or backaches or whatever. That's about it. And so the risks and the long-term issues with donating a kidney are simply not that much. So those are the pillars that I rest my arguments on. When I kind of look you in the eye, metaphorically, because this is a podcast and there's not a video version, when I, do the podcast version of looking you in the eye and saying, I think you should donate a kidney, I'm saying that because I think kidney donation is a serious problem. Kidney disease is a serious problem, I should say. And I think that donating a kidney works. It solves the problem. It would end the wait list if we had enough donations. It produces really big gains for the people who get those kidneys, really large gains in their lifespan and in the quality of life they're leading. And the costs are simply not that high. It's safe, it provides huge benefits, and it helps us fix a problem that we know is fixable. There's no mystery about how do we solve the kidney crisis. This is not like breast cancer where, we can come up with breast cancer, you can come up with some clever stuff, but nobody knows how to stop breast cancer from killing people in the end. We know how to stop the kidney crisis. It's very easy. It's only a political and moral failure that keeps the crisis going. And, I think it's a political failure because I think ultimately I'm in favor of compensating people for kidney donations. I know that's an ethically fraught argument, but we're losing so many people to kidney disease every year, and they can be saved. And, even people who have moral qualms about kidney donation, I accept that they have serious reservations, but to me, the potential good from saving those people outweighs those reservations. So I think it's a political failure in that sense. And I also think it's a moral failure. I'm hesitant to point at any individual person and say you have done morally wrong if you don't donate a kidney. But, if we have hundreds of millions of people in this country and we can't get 10,000 to donate a kidney, we can't even get 0.1% or 0.01% to donate a kidney. And that is the case. It is the case that we can't even get 0.01%. We can't even get 1 in 10,000 people to donate a kidney. And I think that's a moral failure. I think as a society, we have a massive moral failure that we can't even get 1 in 10,000 people to donate a kidney. Not even 0.01% of people will do this. Because if that amount of people did it every year, if we could get 1 in 10,000 people per year to donate a kidney, the kidney crisis would be over. But we can't do that. We've failed to do that. And so we have tens of thousands of people dying needlessly every year. So, it's not a mystery how we fix this. We know how to fix it. We haven't done it. My argument is that more of us should. Some of you out there will be in situations where it doesn't make sense for you to donate. You may be quite old and in poor health, or both. And, if you're already in very poor health, or if you're already quite old, perhaps you are not the specific person who should be donating. That's not to say if you're not slightly old that you can't donate. I've heard of donors up into their 60s even. I think some unusually healthy 60-year-olds, but it has been done and it can be done. But certainly the more typical case of a kidney donor is that it's a younger person, a young, healthy person. And you don't have to be perfectly healthy either. I was slightly overweight, I think, when I donated a kidney. Not obese, but I could stand to lose a few pounds, like a lot of us, But it didn't stop me. I'm lucky that I've never had serious health problems, and so I was a good candidate. I know that also some of you are going to be younger women who are listening, who may be thinking about having families. And again, I wouldn't begrudge you if you said I don't want to do this because it may make my pregnancy slightly more dangerous. I also don't want to overplay that it will make your pregnancy deadly, but there is an additional risk factor there, and so I understand that. Maybe it makes more sense for you to wait until after you've had kids. But I also know that beyond those people who can't do it for reasons of sickness, age, or life plans or whatever, that there are people who can do it. There are plenty of young women who are not planning to have kids, or women who've already had their kids who listen to this podcast. There are plenty of young men who listen to this podcast. And some of you can and should donate a kidney. I don't know anyone's individual situation. I don't know what it's like for you at your job and what your life is like right now. But I know that collectively we have many thousands of listeners, some up into the tens of thousands, really. And that collectively some of you definitely, just by chance, have to be good candidates. Probably a pretty good percentage. And this is my call for you to take it seriously. This is something you should consider. If you are considering it, my Twitter handle is @JeremiahDJohns, and my DMs are open. I am permanently happy to talk about this with anyone at any time. I'm happy to share resources and answer any questions you have. Because people do have a lot of questions. There's a lot of questions people have. I've done things like Ask Me Anythings on how the kidney donation process works, what it was like, after the surgery. I'm trying to think of some of the most common ones. One thing that happens is, people are very curious, what happens if I need a kidney? End-stage renal disease is very rare in kidney donors, but if you do need a kidney, and you are a kidney donor, you actually get a priority. You kind of get moved towards the front of the list, and you are more likely to get a kidney because of your status. That's something that people worry about. Sometimes people worry about, well, what if I give a kidney away and then I have a family member who needs one? First, I kind of think that's like, I don't know, like, it's still a person who's dying in front of you. Like, obviously you would want to save your family member, but that's a hypothetical that probably won't happen. And this person who might need your kidney is dying right now. So that's the first argument. The second thing is that it's actually very common now. The biggest kidney exchanges in America, the biggest programs that run these kidney donation operations, they have a sort of program by which if one of your family members needs a kidney, they can get that priority in the same way that you get priority for being a kidney donor. So it's actually, it helps alleviate that concern, knowing that, oh, well, what if my mom needs a kidney one day? Well, if you donate a kidney, your mom will get, additional consideration on the list. She'll get priority. A lot of people ask, like, how specifically does the post-operation recovery go like? I think what's pretty typical is that you're in the hospital for about 2 days, 3 days max, I think, in most cases. But for me, it was 2 days. And the other people I know, it's also just been 2 days, and the first day is awful. It's genuinely awful. It's one of the worst health days I've had. But you get better very rapidly. Like, one of the things I say a lot is that the first 24 hours after you wake up out of surgery are like having like the worst flu of your life where you just feel like death, and it's awful. And then the next 24 hours are like having the regular flu where you kind of feel like crap, but like not in a way like you're going to die. You just kind of feel like crap. And then the third day afterwards is more like, well, you're recovering from the flu. You can tell that you're still not 100%, but you can also tell like you're getting better. It gets better every single day. It took me about 2 weeks to get all the way back to 100%. And the primary thing that wasn't 100% in those 2 weeks was mostly that I just was really sleepy and tired all the time. Like, I'd get tired during the middle of the day and have to go sleep for a couple hours. I was also lucky in that I could take time off from work. I had a job that allowed me to take some paid time off for that. And so, for me, it went really smoothly. I just took time off and I was ready to go back within 2 or 3 weeks. Sometimes people ask me if there's like a specific medication I have to be on after doing this. I think that's generally them confusing, and I'm not a doctor, so take this with a grain of salt, but my understanding is that the recipient usually has to take like immunosuppressing drugs for a long time, maybe for as long as they've got a donated kidney, which might be the rest of their life. But I think it's very common to take immunosuppressing drugs to stop you from rejecting the kidney. But if you donate a kidney, there's no, I got they'll give you a prescription for a prescription painkiller if you want, but that's just for the couple days afterwards. I have not been on any medication of any kind since donating the kidney. Some people are honestly like, I don't know what I would tell my family. My family would be against this. And to that, I just say, they might surprise you. I was not sure how my family was going to react, but almost every single person that I told about this, family, friends, coworkers, random people, acquaintances, almost universally it's been positive. I was a little apprehensive too because people were like, why are you doing this? Why would you do this? Blah, blah, blah. Especially in my case because I donated to a stranger. I did not even know who the kidney was going to. I just knew that there's people on the wait list, tens of thousands of them, up to 100,000, like I said. And I have a kidney and it will match somebody. If you want to donate, they will find someone on the wait list who you are a match for. I promise you. There's a lot of people waiting for a kidney. And so I thought, maybe people would have that reaction, but almost universally people were supportive and wonderful about it. And I don't regret that at all. There's honestly basically nothing about the whole process that I regret. I consider it one of the best things I've ever done. And I try to evangelize for it as much as I can. I have a small platform here. I'm not, a person who has a platform with millions of followers, but for the followers that I do have, through the Neoliberal Project and through my own, efforts on Twitter and podcast and other sites, I try to advocate for this because I think it's a good thing to do. It's something I believe in, and I've never regretted it, not even for a little bit. So that's my pitch. That's this week's episode. This is, as I said, hopefully it should be releasing on the 25th of June. This is my, it's something I've been thinking about as I come up on the anniversary. And so I wanted to make this pitch to you that you should consider donating a kidney. If this episode has convinced you at all, or if it's just made you curious, please absolutely feel free to DM me on Twitter. Again, my handle is @JeremiahDJohns, and I am more than happy to talk about kidney donation as long as anyone would want. My DMs are open, so feel free. There's also a number of good resources out there. I can recommend the National Kidney Registry as a really good resource that knows what they're talking about, that coordinates a lot of these things. They are the ones who coordinated my kidney donation between me doing it in New York and I think it ended up in Baltimore. before I donated, the only thing I knew about my recipient was they said it's a young person from Baltimore. And I think they insinuated, they hinted that this person had been like a very hard to match patient, like that they were not, their proteins or whatever were not a common thing, and it was very hard to find them a match. So I think they were very happy about that. But other than that, all I knew was that it was a young person in Baltimore, and that's it. And the National Kidney Registry was who helped arrange all of it. They run these programs, and they're a great resource if you want to look them up. I can also heavily recommend a group called Waitlist Zero. The goal of Waitlist Zero, it's a nonprofit, is, like it says in the name, they want to get the wait list down to zero. They would like no one to be waiting for a kidney, that kidneys would be abundant, and everyone who needs a kidney could get one. They do a lot of great work in terms of, if you have questions about the donating process, if it's something you're considering, they are there. It's their purpose to answer these questions for you, to make you feel comfortable with the process, to give you as much knowledge as you need. They'll have someone call you and talk you through it personally if you just need to talk to somebody about it. Waitlist Zero was one of the first phone calls I made when I said, you know what, I think I want to do this, but I need to know more. And I called Waitlist Zero, and I talked with a guy named Josh, who is a former kidney donor himself, who founded it, and he gave me everything I needed. He helped me look up information. He actually helped me find the studies that I researched. He knows a scary amount about kidney policy and kidney donations, and I cannot recommend Waitlist Zero enough. So I will include links to all of this in the description. I'll include my Twitter handle. I'll include the contact information for Waitlist Zero. I'll include the National Kidney Registry. If you're considering it, and I hope you do, please feel free to reach out to any and all of those. And that's today's episode. I hope that you haven't gotten sick of the word kidney, and we'll be back to the regular interviews and panels, after this one. But I'd like to thank you guys all for indulging me, and that we can do an extra kind of a bonus kidney episode on top of the episode earlier this week, because it's a subject that's important to me, and I hope that it will be important to some of you as well. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.